I stared at the number on the screen for what felt like an eternity. $44 million. Not a typo, not a glitch in the banking system. My sister Jennifer had just inherited $44 million from our father's estate. And according to the lawyer's email that arrived 3 minutes ago, I was getting nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a dime, not a piece of furniture, not even Dad's vintage watch that he'd promised me since I was 12 years old. I remember sitting at my kitchen table in our modest 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside, California, my coffee going cold beside me, thinking, how is this possible? We were supposed to be a family. We were supposed to handle this together. Instead, I was about to be thrown out on the street. But that's getting ahead of things. You need to understand what life looked like before everything fell apart. You need to know who we were when Dad was still alive, when Jennifer still answered my calls, when I actually believed we'd have each other's backs no matter what. Let me take you back. 3 months earlier, everything felt right. My name is Michael. I'm 42 years old, and I work as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm in Southern California. I make decent money, around $95,000 a year, enough to afford a comfortable life, though not fancy. My wife Sarah and I had been together for 16 years, married for 13. We had 2 kids, Emma, who was 11, and Jake, who was 9. Sarah worked part-time as a dental hygienist, which gave us flexibility with the kids' schedules. We weren't rich, but we were solid, stable, the kind of family that showed up to Thanksgiving, paid our bills on time, and didn't have drama. Or at least, that's what I thought. Our house was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath in a quiet neighborhood north of Riverside. Sarah had decorated it with this mix of modern and farmhouse style that I didn't fully understand but loved anyway. There were photos on the walls, us at the Grand Canyon, the kids at Emma's soccer games, a family portrait from last Christmas where Jake had refused to smile. The front yard had a little garden where Sarah grew tomatoes and basil. It was the kind of place that felt like home, you know? Not because it was huge or impressive, but because it held our life. My father, Richard, was 78 years old. He lived about 40 minutes away in a gated community in San Bernardino. He'd retired from his accounting practice about 12 years prior, and he'd done well for himself, really well. He owned his house outright, had solid investments, and lived a comfortable, quiet lifestyle. He'd remarried about 5 years before this story starts, a woman named Linda who was 10 years younger than him. They seemed happy together, though Sarah always said Linda seemed a little too interested in Dad's money. But that's the kind of thing spouses say sometimes, and I'd never taken it seriously. Dad and I got along great. We'd have lunch together most Sundays, just the 2 of us. He'd ask about work, about the kids, about Sarah. He'd slip Emma and Jake $20 each when he saw them. He was the kind of grandfather who remembered their birthdays and asked about their grades. Nothing fancy, but consistent and genuine. I remember one Sunday, about 4 months before his death, we were sitting at this Mexican place we both loved, and he told me, "Michael, you're doing everything right. You've got a good wife, good kids, a solid job. Don't take it for granted." I wasn't taking it for granted. I knew how lucky I was. My sister Jennifer is 5 years older than me. She'd always been the ambitious one. While I was content with my stable job and my family, Jennifer had built a career in commercial real estate in Los Angeles. She was successful, really successful. She made probably 3 times what I made, owned a beautiful condo in Santa Monica, drove a Mercedes, had all the trappings of someone who'd made it big. We weren't super close, but we were cordial. We'd see each other at family gatherings, exchange texts on birthdays, that sort of thing. Sarah always said Jennifer looked at us like we were beneath her, but I thought that was unfair. Jennifer was just different, more driven, more ambitious. Then Dad had his stroke. It was a Tuesday morning in late September. He was getting ready to go to his weekly golf game when Linda found him collapsed in the bedroom. The paramedics got him to the hospital within minutes, but the damage was already done. The left side of his body was partially paralyzed. His speech was slurred. The doctor said he was lucky. It could have been so much worse, but lucky felt like a strange word for what happened next. The first week was chaos. Jennifer flew down from LA immediately. I took time off work. Sarah held down the fort with the kids. We all gathered at the hospital, waiting to hear what Dad's recovery would look like. The doctors gave us the usual cautious speech. With physical therapy, he might regain some function, but he'd never be quite the same. At 78, recovery was always slower, more uncertain. What I didn't know was that Jennifer was already making moves. I found out about 3 weeks into Dad's recovery when he was transferred to a rehabilitation facility. The neurologist was explaining his prognosis to us, about a 50-50 chance of significant improvement with intensive therapy, when Jennifer pulled me aside in the hallway. "Michael, we need to talk about Dad's affairs," she said. She was wearing this sharp black blazer and had her phone in her hand. Very on brand for Jennifer. "His affairs?" I asked. "He's going to be fine. The doctors said with therapy—" "I know what the doctors said," she interrupted, "but we have to be realistic. He might need full-time care. His house might need to be sold. There are financial decisions to make." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Okay, well, shouldn't we talk to him about that? He's conscious. He can make his own decisions. "Of course," Jennifer said quickly. Too quickly. "But I'm already looking into his accounts. His lawyer is going to need to update his will. I've got the name of a really good estate attorney if you want the number." Why was she so eager to update his will? That was the question that should have set off alarms in my head right then. But I was focused on Dad getting better. I was naive. I said something like, "Let's just see how his recovery goes first," and Jennifer nodded and didn't push. But she was pushing, just quietly. 2 months passed. Dad made slow progress. His speech improved. His right side got stronger. His left side, the side that was paralyzed, improved too, but not as much. The doctors said he'd probably be able to leave the rehab facility and go home, but he'd need some assistance with daily tasks. Linda was there through all of it. She visited him every day, brought him flowers, helped him with his physical therapy. I actually started to feel guilty for doubting her. She seemed genuinely invested in Dad's recovery. It was mid-November when I first noticed something was off. I'd gone to visit Dad on a Wednesday afternoon, bringing Emma with me. She wanted to show him a drawing she'd done for art class. We got to the rehab facility around 3 o'clock, and one of the nurses mentioned that Dad had a visitor earlier, his lawyer apparently. I didn't think much of it until I asked Dad about it. "Oh yeah," Dad said. His speech was almost back to normal now, though he still moved carefully on his left side. Jennifer had me set up a meeting. She said it was important to update some things. Make sure everything's in order. "What kind of things?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Estate stuff, I guess. Trusts, wills, that sort of thing." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "You know Jennifer. She's always thinking about the big picture." I remember Emma showing him her drawing. It was a landscape with mountains and a lake, really beautiful for an 11-year-old, and Dad praising her work and asking her about school. But my mind wasn't really there. Why would Jennifer have Dad meet with a lawyer without mentioning it to me? Why wouldn't she ask me if I wanted to be there? That night, I texted Jennifer, "Hey, heard Dad met with his lawyer. Everything okay?" She took 3 hours to respond. "Yeah, just making sure his estate is properly organized. Wanted to get ahead of any complications. No big deal." But it felt like a big deal. It felt like she was doing something without letting me in on it. I didn't push, though. I told myself I was being paranoid. Jennifer and I had never been super close, but we were still siblings, family. She wouldn't do anything sketchy, right? Wrong. So very wrong. A month later, my father had another stroke. This one was bigger. This one was fatal. Act 5. Deno. It was December 23rd when the lawyer's call came through. I was at work, standing in the middle of a construction site in Riverside, reviewing blueprints with my crew foreman, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mr. Michael Patterson?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes, this is he." "This is Catherine Morris from Morris & Associates Legal. I'm calling regarding the estate of Richard Patterson. I need to inform you that Mr. Patterson passed away this morning at 6:47 a.m. His wife Linda was present. I'm the executor of his estate, and I need to schedule a meeting with all beneficiaries to read the will." The blueprints fell from my hands. A guy named Derek caught them before they hit the ground, asking if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I wasn't anywhere close to okay. When? I managed to say. We can schedule for next week, Thursday, December 26th, at my office in San Bernardino, 2 p.m. Please bring valid identification. I hung up. Derek was staring at me like I'd just received news that the building was on fire. Your dad? He asked quietly. I nodded. I couldn't speak. The drive home was a blur. I called Sarah on the way. She was picking up Jake from soccer practice, and when she heard my voice, she knew something was catastrophically wrong. By the time I got home, she'd told the kids that Grandpa had gotten very sick and passed away. Emma cried. Jake didn't really understand what it meant. Sarah held them while I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't pour water. The next 3 days were a fever dream of phone calls, funeral arrangements, and family gatherings that felt surreal. Jennifer flew down from LA immediately. She showed up at our house on Christmas Eve with her perfect black outfit already prepared, like she'd been expecting this, like she'd been planning for it. She was cold to me, professional. She talked to Sarah, hugged the kids without really hugging them, and then pulled me aside into the garage. Michael, we need to talk about the will reading, she said. The lawyer's going to go through everything on the 26th. Okay, I said. I was still in shock. The idea of my father being gone, actually gone, hadn't fully landed. I just want to prepare you, Jennifer continued. Dad's will was updated about 2 months ago, before his second stroke. The lawyer, Catherine Morris, she's already given me a preview of the contents. Something cold moved through my chest. Why would she give you a preview? Because I asked for one, Jennifer said flatly, and because I was the one managing his affairs while he was in rehab. Jennifer, what are you talking about? Just be prepared for the numbers to be different than you might expect. Dad made some choices about how to divide his estate. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but something in her face, something closed off and certain, told me I wouldn't like the answer. The will reading was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. I requested to take time off work. Sarah offered to come with me, but I told her no, it would be fine. I was an idiot. I should have brought her. The lawyer's office was in a sleek building in downtown San Bernardino. Gray carpet, glass walls, that particular smell of corporate air conditioning. Catherine Morris was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She greeted Jennifer and me in her office with Linda trailing behind, dressed entirely in black, like a widow from a 1950s movie. Please sit, Catherine said, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. Jennifer sat down smoothly, like she already knew what was coming. I sat down slowly, my stomach twisting. Catherine opened a leather folder and adjusted her glasses. The will of Richard Patterson, dated November 15th, was finalized 2 months ago. This document supersedes any previous versions. I'll be reading the significant provisions now. She began with the house, the one in San Bernardino where Dad had lived. She was leaving it to Linda. No surprise there, I guess. Linda was his wife. Then she moved to his investment accounts, his 401k, his savings. The bulk of Mr. Patterson's liquid assets, Catherine said, totaling approximately $44 million, are to be placed in a trust to be managed by Linda Patterson, with instructions that upon her death, these funds are to be distributed to his daughter, Jennifer Patterson. The words didn't make sense. They were English words in an English sentence, but they didn't connect to anything in my brain. I'm sorry, I said. Can you repeat that? The $44 million, Catherine said, not unkindly, goes to a trust with Linda as the beneficiary during her lifetime, then to Jennifer. But what about... I looked at Jennifer. She was staring straight ahead. What about me? Catherine cleared her throat. There is a provision. Richard also left his personal effects, his watch collection, his golf clubs, some artwork, to be divided between his children. And there's a sum of $50,000 allocated to his son, Michael Patterson, to be distributed immediately. $50,000. My father's entire estate was $44 million, and I was getting $50,000. That was it. That was my inheritance. That was what I was worth to him. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I don't understand. He always said he'd take care of us equally. He said, "Perhaps," Catherine said carefully, "he had his reasons. The will is very clear. It was witnessed by 2 people and notarized. It's legally binding." I looked at Jennifer again. "Did you know about this?" She met my eyes for exactly 1 second. "I knew Dad was updating his will," she said. "I didn't know the specifics until Catherine called me yesterday. It was a lie. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, but I couldn't prove it, and at that moment, I was too devastated to care." Linda spoke for the first time. "Your father and I discussed the allocation extensively. He felt that Jennifer's career path and financial stability meant she should be the primary beneficiary. He wanted to help you, Michael, but he also wanted to ensure Linda would be comfortable in her later years." Comfortable. She was already comfortable. She'd married a 78-year-old man with $44 million, and now she was going to spend it while I watched from the outside. "I need to leave," I said, standing up. My legs felt like they were filled with water. "Michael, if you have any questions about the distribution," Catherine started. I didn't hear the rest. I walked out of that office and into the hallway, and I kept walking until I found a men's room. I locked myself in a stall and threw up, actually vomited into the toilet like I was sick, because I was sick. Sick with betrayal and rage, and the soul-crushing realization that my own father had chosen his new wife over his son. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, just breathing, just trying to process a world that no longer made sense. When I came out, Jennifer was waiting by the elevators. "Don't," I said before she could speak. "Michael," I said, "don't. You knew. You had to have known. Why else would you have had Dad meet with a lawyer without telling me? Why else would you ask for a preview?" "Because I wanted to know what was happening," Jennifer said. "That's all." "You're a liar." "I'm not. You're a liar, and you're a bitch, and I don't want to see you again." The words were out before I could stop them. Jennifer's face went hard. "Fine, don't. You want to know the truth? Dad and I talked about his will 3 months ago. He told me he was disappointed in you. He said you'd never amounted to anything, that you were content to be mediocre, and that he wanted his money to go to someone who had actually achieved something. Those were his words, Michael, not mine." It was like being stabbed, like having the knife twisted. "He loved you," I whispered. "He said he was proud of me." "He said that to everyone," Jennifer said coldly. "It didn't mean anything." I drove home in a state that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. I don't remember most of it. I remember the highway. I remember my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I remember thinking about just driving straight into a median and being done with all of it. When I got home, Sarah took one look at my face and knew. She didn't even ask. She just held me while I fell apart in the kitchen, my shoulders shaking, my whole body convulsing with sobs that came from somewhere deeper than grief. This was betrayal. This was the death of everything I thought I understood about my life. "We're going to be okay," Sarah whispered. "Michael, we're going to be okay." But we weren't. We weren't going to be okay. Because the $50,000 that I inherited, that was about to be the only thing standing between us and complete financial ruin. And I didn't know it yet, but the real nightmare was only just beginning. The next 3 weeks were a blur of numbness and logistics. Sarah tried to keep life normal for Emma and Jake, but the atmosphere in our house had shifted. There was this underlying tension, like we were all waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it did. It dropped hard. It was January 8th when Linda's lawyer sent me the formal notice. I was at work when the email came through, and I remember standing in the construction trailer, reading it twice to make sure I understood the words correctly. The house, our house, the one Sarah had decorated with such care, the one that held every memory of our family, was being sold. Not by choice. Linda was exercising some clause in Dad's will that gave her the authority to liquidate assets to pay for her ongoing care and comfort. The $44 million wasn't enough. She wanted more. Our lease on the rental property was up in February, and Linda had used her newfound power to evict us. Literally, evict us. Through a lawyer. Through paperwork and legal notices. The house we'd rented for 8 years was being taken back, and there was nothing we could do about it. I called Jennifer that night. I shouldn't have, but I did. What did you tell her? I demanded. No preamble, no hello. Michael, what did you tell Linda about our family's finances, about the house, about anything? There was a long silence. Then, I didn't tell her anything. She's Dad's wife. She has access to his records. She's evicting us, Jennifer. She's selling the house, and she's evicting us from a rental property. How is that legal? I don't know, Jennifer said, and she sounded tired. Maybe it's not. Have you talked to a lawyer? The answer was no, I hadn't, because a lawyer cost money, and I had exactly $50,000 to my name, and I had a mortgage on a house that was about to be sold out from under me, and 2 kids who needed to eat. That's when I made the call that changed everything. I contacted the lawyer who'd read Dad's will, Catherine Morris. I told her receptionist that I needed an emergency consultation regarding potential elder abuse and undue influence in my father's estate. That got me an appointment within 48 hours. Catherine's office was colder this time. She sat across from me with her reading glasses off, and I laid out what had happened. The timing of the will change, Jennifer's involvement in getting Dad to meet with the lawyer, the sudden changes to the estate distribution, Linda's aggressive actions to liquidate assets and evict me from a rental property. Do you have documentation? Catherine asked, pulling out a legal pad. Of the rental eviction, yes. Of Linda's attempts to access and sell other properties, I'm not sure. But I have emails from Jennifer mentioning the will update, and I have witnesses. The nurses at the rehab facility saw Jennifer meeting with Dad's lawyer. Catherine made notes. Then she looked up at me. Michael, I need to be honest with you. What you're describing sounds potentially fraudulent, but proving undue influence in an estate is extremely difficult. Your father was competent. He signed the documents. He had legal representation. But Jennifer didn't sign anything. She didn't coerce him directly, as far as we know. If she influenced him, it would be hard to prove without testimony from your father, which we can't get. I felt the hope I'd been clinging to drain away. So there's nothing I can do. I didn't say that, Catherine said carefully. There's another angle, Linda's behavior since your father's death, the evictions, the attempts to access and liquidate assets aggressively. That suggests she might be acting in bad faith, which could call the validity of the will into question. And if we can prove that Jennifer helped facilitate that bad faith action, we might have grounds for a lawsuit. What kind of lawsuit? A challenge to the will on the grounds of undue influence. We'd need to depose Jennifer, Linda, and the witnesses to the will signing. We'd need to examine the circumstances surrounding the will change. It would be costly, but if we win, the will could be invalidated, and your father's previous estate plan would go into effect. How costly? $15,000 to $20,000 minimum, possibly more if it goes to trial. I had $50,000. A lawyer would cost $15,000 to $20,000. That would leave me with $30,000 to $35,000 to survive on while fighting a legal battle that might take months or years. And if I lost, I'd have spent that money for nothing. But if I didn't fight, Linda would drain the estate and Jennifer would get nothing, and I'd be left with even less. I hired Catherine Morris that day. The next month was a legal nightmare. Catherine filed a petition to challenge the will based on undue influence. She subpoenaed Jennifer and Linda. She got the nurses from the rehab facility to provide statements about the frequency and nature of Jennifer's visits and her conversations with Dad. She obtained phone records showing calls between Jennifer and the lawyer in the weeks before the will was updated. Jennifer's deposition was scheduled for February 15th. I wasn't supposed to be there, but Catherine let me watch from the waiting room through a video feed. I saw my sister sit down across from Catherine, saw her straighten her blazer, saw the lawyer ask the first question. Ms. Patterson, when did you first become aware of your father's intention to update his will? I don't recall exactly, Jennifer said carefully. He mentioned it at some point after his stroke. And did you encourage that decision? No. I simply wanted to make sure his affairs were in order. You had him meet with a lawyer without informing your brother. Why? Because I didn't think it was my responsibility to inform him. My father's personal business is his own. But you had access to your father's financial records. You knew the extent of his assets, and you had him meet with an estate attorney specifically to update his will. That seems like more than just making sure his affairs were in order. Jennifer's jaw tightened. I helped my father understand his options, that's all. Did you suggest any specific distribution of assets? No. Did you discuss with him what your brother might inherit? No. Did you discuss with him your own financial situation, your career success, your accomplishments? Jennifer didn't answer for a long moment. Then, we may have discussed those things in general conversation. In general conversation, or specifically in the context of updating his will? I don't remember. Catherine leaned forward. Ms. Patterson, your father had a stroke in September. By November, his will had been completely rewritten to leave the vast majority of his estate to his new wife, with instructions that it would go to you upon her death. Your brother, who had maintained a consistent relationship with your father and who had expressed a need for financial assistance, received $50,000. Don't you find that arrangement unusual? I find it to be your father's choice, Jennifer said coldly, but you facilitated that choice. You arranged the lawyer, you had him sign the documents, and now your brother is being evicted from his home by the woman who benefited most from that rewritten will. How do you justify that? I don't have to justify anything, Jennifer said. My father made his own decisions. That's when Catherine asked the question that broke the case. Ms. Patterson, do you have any text messages or emails between you and your father discussing the will? Jennifer's face went pale. I may have some emails. Did you keep those emails? I don't know. Would you be willing to provide any electronic communications between you and your father's lawyer, or your father's wife regarding the estate? Jennifer's lawyer, she'd brought her own counsel, leaned over and whispered something in her ear. Then Jennifer said, My client is willing to provide any relevant communications. But she didn't have to. Catherine already had them. She'd subpoenaed Jennifer's email account as part of the discovery process, and there, in black and white, was a chain of emails where Jennifer had told Dad, I think Linda is the right priority here. Your wife needs security. I'm doing well enough on my own, and Michael has a good job. You should take care of Linda first. There was another email where Jennifer had written, The lawyer says we can set it up so Linda gets the bulk during her lifetime, and then it comes to me when she's gone. That way you're supporting her, but the money stays in the family. In the family. That was the phrase that did it. She didn't mean our family, she meant her family. She meant herself. Catherine presented these emails to the judge. She presented the testimony from the nurses about Jennifer's frequent visits and conversations with Dad. She presented phone records showing the calls between Jennifer and the lawyer. And she presented the most damning piece of evidence, a recording from the rehab facility's security camera, showing Jennifer literally handing Dad a piece of paper with the lawyer's contact information. Jennifer claimed she was just helping him, but the pattern was clear. She'd identified an opportunity, she'd exploited her father's vulnerability after his stroke, and she'd engineered a will that benefited her at the expense of her brother. The judge ruled in my favor on March 22nd. The will was invalidated. Dad's previous estate plan went into effect, which divided his assets equally between Jennifer and me. The $44 million was split in half. Jennifer got $22 million. I got $22 million. Linda got the house and her widow's pension. Nothing more. Jennifer's face when the judge read the decision. I wasn't there to see it, but Catherine described it as the color draining from her skin, like someone had pulled a plug. The legal fees ended up being $17,000. That left me with $33,000 from my inheritance, while the estate was being processed. The remaining funds would be released over the course of 3 months, as assets were liquidated and redistributed. I paid off our house. I set aside college funds for Emma and Jake. I told Sarah we were going to be okay. And then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I sent Jennifer a single text message. You taught me what happens when you forget where you come from. Thank you for the lesson. She never responded. I heard through family friends that she'd moved to Miami. I don't know if she was running from the shame or just starting over. Either way, I didn't care. What I cared about was sitting at the kitchen table with Sarah and the kids on a Saturday morning in April, drinking coffee that I could finally afford to be good, and feeling like I could breathe again. Emma was telling me about her school play. Jake was asking if we could get a dog now that we owned the house. Sarah was smiling at me in a way she hadn't smiled in months. Dad left me more than money. He left me the clarity that some betrayals teach you who you actually are. And who I am is someone who fights. Someone who doesn't accept injustice. Someone who gets back up. Sometimes the inheritance isn't the money. Sometimes it's the strength to reclaim your own life.